Hello and welcome to day 4 of the summit. I'm Ottman Smith of the Holistic Life Foundation, and I'm grateful to be here with you and welcome the compassionate and wise Tara Brach. Tara has been practicing and teaching meditation since 1975, as well as leading workshops and meditation retreats at centers throughout North America and Europe. She has a PhD in clinical psychology, is a founder of the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, and is the author of several beloved books: Radical Acceptance, True Refuge, and Radical Compassion. Her most recent book, Trusting the Gold, Uncovering Your Natural Goodness, was released by Sounds True in June of 2021. How you doing, Tara? Glad that you could join us today.
Yeah, thank you, Atman. Really happy to be with you.
It's definitely an honor to share space with you. I appreciate that this conference allowed the platform for that to happen.
Ditto, me too.
All right. So your teachings are so rich with Buddhist psychology, yogic philosophy, Western psychology practices, social justice reflections, and stories of real human trials and tribulations. I'm curious about what initially brought you to explore the path of healing and how you came to weave all these practices together.
These are the times for being more eclectic. I mean, we get to be. So, yeah. Well, so when I was in college, I was really involved with social activism. It was an urban environment. I was working for tenants' rights with Black, Latina organizers. Also, I was a type A student, so I was planning to go to law school. And then in the thick of this, I started yoga and meditation classes on Tuesday nights. And so then, these other nights or on the weekend, I'd be at rallies with all this fervor, left wing fervor, and, then come to my Tuesday class and it would be quiet and meditation, incense. I mean, you get the idea. Well, one spring night, I was walking home after class and the fragrance of the blossoms in the air, and I stopped and I realized that my body and my mind were in the same place at the same time. And it was such an experience of peace and openness and connectedness with the world. And I thought, well, this is what I really need. And then the next thought, and this is what we need to create the world we believe in. And so at age 21, I made a kind of 180. And instead of law school, I moved into an ashram, a spiritual community. And I was teaching yoga and meditation. And then after I left, Buddhist retreats and practices and teaching mindfulness and compassion. And then I wove in getting my doctorate in psychology, became a clinical psychologist because it seemed so clear that the whole domain of emotions is such a rich portal to spiritual awakening. And then over time, I returned to continue the activism I had in the past, but it really was more what you might call love-based activism. Really coming from a place of love and compassion, not a place of anger and hatred. And here's the thing, and I know you know this, Atman, because of your amazing work with teens in Baltimore. We belong to this world, and our inner awakening and our inner freedom can't be separated from how it's expressed. How we care for each other, how we care for those who are most vulnerable, and really for this living earth. Of course, we each engage in our own ways, but it's a natural expression of the awakening heart. So that has continued to be an active weave in all of my teaching. So I hope I addressed what you were asking.
Definitely did. I appreciate it. Very insightful. So just getting to one of your phrases that you use that I love. You say that the trance of unworthiness to describe when we're in a space of not enoughness and separation. In your most recent book, Trusting the Gold, you say we cover over the gold as we seek the approval of others, looking to them to measure our worth. to determine whether we are good enough, smart enough, successful enough. And if we are part of a non-dominant group in our culture, we take on additional layers of protection to help us face the violence of social injustice and oppression. So many of us were raised under the premise that we often have to earn affection, and that if we act a certain way, look a certain way, or achieve certain things, then we are considered valuable and lovable. So this notion that we are fundamentally valuable and good is a big departure from that, which, is very welcome, because that would be, a very horrible outlook on life to have. Do you remember when you first encountered this concept and how it affected you at the time?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to say what you're bringing up, this sense that we have unconditional goodness, that we all have this basic goodness has really been kind of at the center of things for me for decades. And, I mentioned attending yoga meditation classes and then deepening practice. And there are just these growing number of experiences of feeling filled with light and love, the gold, and also increasingly aware as I'd move through the day of how quickly you could get covered over. So I'd go from feeling expansive and light and just filled with spirit, to, everything that was going wrong, all my neurosis, all my imperfections. And this really became the suffering that I wanted to unravel and unhook from. And one of the stories that most impacted me, and some of those listening might be familiar, you might be familiar, Atman, it took place in Thailand. There was a enormous clay statue of the Buddha, and not so aesthetic. It was loved by the local population, but it had been there for 6 centuries. It had survived through storms and invasions. Well, in the 1950s, it began to crack. And so some curious monks kind of shined little flashlights into the cracks to look at the infrastructure. And what shined back was a flash of gold. And so they continued to look through the cracks and then realized that the covering was plaster and clay, but inside was the largest solid gold statue of the Buddha in all of Southeast Asia. And it now attracts people from around the globe. But here's what's interesting. The monks believe that this amazing work of art had been covered over with plaster and clay to protect it during periods of conflict and unrest, through difficult times, in the same way that when we humans encounter difficulty, we cover over our innate purity, our goodness, our light, our love, so much so that we forget who we are. In other words, we get identified with the coverings, with the defenses and the ego and trying to prove ourselves, and we forget who's looking through. We forget that tenderness, that heart awareness that's looking through. So during my early years, my longing just grew and grew to realize and trust in that, not to push away and pretend that the egoic stuff wasn't a part of me. And I'll share one story, which is that I remember being in a women's group in our spiritual community and confessing the pain of really not trusting myself, of feeling just how unspiritual I was, that I was ego-centered and controlling and judgmental and competitive and selfish, all these things, the coverings. And I hated myself. And I don't remember what other people responded, but I do remember going off into my room and really opening to the pain of the trance of unworthiness, of self-aversion, and weeping and sensing how many moments in my life I had been dominated by this sense of something's wrong with me. How much it had stopped me from being intimate with others or taking in the wonder of the beauty around me, or being creative or playful or spontaneous. And what came up was this kind of a soul sadness for lost life. And really holding that with compassion and sensing this longing for freedom. And everything got much more quiet and spacious, and there was just this real vast tenderness holding what was going on. And that was the gold, that was the gold. And I was just resting in this, and I wasn't identified with all the waves of imperfection, but I was holding them with kindness. It's like the ocean holding the waves and realizing that this is who I am more than any story I tell myself. And I share that because I have, in some form or other, repeated that process many rounds of starting by feeling unworthy, turned on myself, feeling the pain of it, holding it with compassion, and rediscovering the gold, the sense of tender, awake awareness that really is who we are. And the more I do it, the deeper the trust in that goodness comes. So thank you for that question, because this really is quite at the center of my practice and what I teach others.
Thank you for that answer. That was beautiful. So one thing that I've noticed, in working in, some of the communities that I work with, like you said, I work in underserved communities in Baltimore City, one of the more underserved communities, in the country. A lot of people that I've seen, point the finger at certain communities when they're not from them. They say that they don't really care about their communities because it's so, dirty outside. It's so much litter on the streets, or, that, people don't care about their schools because it's, so much dysfunction in the schools. Like, kids are getting up and, starting fights in schools or disrespecting their teachers. And, one thing that, me and my brother and my other business partner always say is that it's really hard to get kids to care about, their environment or anyone outside of themselves if they don't care about themselves, if they don't love themselves. And, one of the things that our teacher used to always tell us is that love is the most powerful force in the universe, and, how, love can heal all, I know Dr. Bessel van der Kolk even said that, besides blunt force trauma to the head, or trauma to the head, that love can heal, almost all types of trauma. So I have a quick question for you. How would you describe love? And what might you say to someone who's struggling to feel love towards themselves?
Well, your share just now is so powerful, how it's so difficult to take care of our world and to care about ourselves when we're underserved. It's like the messages that come through the society. We think society's thoughts. And the messages that come through to non-dominant communities, whether it's race or class or whatever, is often that you're inferior. So of course you're not loving yourself, because you've got all these imprints from society, meaning from the educational systems and the justice system and housing, every part of it, that something's wrong with you. And as you said so wisely, Atman, the only thing that turns that around is in some way feeling the realness of loving. And often it has to come from the outside. I mean, sometimes, we were wounded in a relationship. We need to get healed in relationships. So sometimes it has to come through the messengers of the society, through the older brothers, like you guys are being, to some kids, and then peers learning how to support each other. So you asked me how would I define love, and the words that come to mind, and I go slow here because love's such a word that we glaze over, is that when we're loving, there's an unconditional acceptance and valuing and cherishing of the life that's here. And we know that what we're loving is indivisible from our own being. We don't love an other. What we're loving is this realization that what you and I are is the same. It's like looking at each other in the eye and really getting, oh, that's true. So when it's challenged, when we're cut off from it, there are different ways to work with it. And one is to let people know they're not alone, that others are at war with themselves and down on themselves. And it's amplified in underserved communities, but it is society-wide because our society has dis-ease. Our society says your worth is based on your looks or your success or your whatever. And so the who we really are doesn't really get tapped into. So there's a lot of ways that meditation can help, and yoga, because yoga helps us get somatically into our bodies and more balanced and more awake. It's a form of meditation. And one pathway is that when you are one of the teens or anyone we know is feeling caught in, I'm unworthy, I'm bad, it's to get in touch with the pain of that and actually, even if you don't feel it, send a message of kindness inwardly. Just act as if. I'm putting my hand on my heart right now. There you go. It's like in some level say to yourself, I care, I'm here, trust your goodness. So we can also imagine somebody else comforting us. Like if I'm working with a kid, I'd say, who do you most want to see you and respect you? And then imagine that person saying, you're good, I really trust who you are. So you can imagine another person. And, the trick is, even if we're acting as if, all of us want to come home to ourselves. All of us want to feel more like we're who we really think we could possibly be. So even, the fake it, you'll make it with offering messages inwardly can be helpful. But I just want to go back to saying it. We need each other. We need to do it in relationships too. We need to bring together groups of kids and groups of adults and name the pain of feeling cut off from our hearts, name the pain of feeling unworthy, and together create kind of a field of caring.
That definitely is needed. Thank you for that again. Since COVID, I found myself supporting kids in communities that I serve online. I know you've been teaching on Zoom. I'm thankful to have connected with people through the internet, and it's been challenging through this time of isolation. As some folks start to come out a bit more, many people have expressed feelings of loneliness and fear around reconnecting. How might we meet this transition and continue to widen our sense of connection and trust in each other?
It's such an important question. I mean, I think of it like our greatest longing and our greatest fear is intimacy. We're relational animals, we're relational creatures. I love that phrase that it's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the nurtured. So we need to nurture each other, and so many of us have been deprived in our, growing up history. We all need it. And why societies have ways for people to connect. So you're right. We've been more isolated than ever. And I'm not so sure it's going to come back to be in person as much as we wish, because I think pandemics are here to stay and that online's going to be an important avenue. And, you know, unless we belong to an extended family or religious community or some close working community, it's easy to be isolated. So one thing that comes up for me is that if you are drawn to meditation in some form, practice in some form, it really helps to get together with a small group of people and practice and then share what's real, you know, share about the divorces and about the isolation and about the addictions and everything, but share what's real in small groups that meet and sit together and practice and come into presence together. I mean, I'm involved with a group called Cloud Sangha. You can find it on my homepage. And we've created mindful friends groups anywhere in the world. You can join and be part of a small group that is dedicated to waking up and also connecting with each other. And the other thing that comes to mind, Atman, in terms of reconnecting with each other is to serve together, help others together. There's nothing that reduces anxiety and brings our hearts together as much as feeling that we care about our larger world, and to just serve together really makes a difference.
Definitely. All right. You shared that you believe the universe to be a friendly place and that we can practice trusting our own goodness. In one of your talks, you very honestly mentioned that your mom, as a philosophy major, kindly challenged this saying, "What makes goodness more basic than badness?" I love that. I love hearing this because it is so real. When I'm in the moment of suffering, it's really easy to turn towards a feeling of separateness or feeling unsupported. How might someone experiment with the feeling, the friendliness of the universe?
Mm. Well, thank you for invoking my mom. Blessings, Mom.
Blessings. Oh, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, trusting the gold. You know, I just love the words because, in a way, when we talk about the friendliness of the universe, that can be a little misleading. What I'm really referring to is that there is some basic benevolence in life, a fundamental loving awareness that's the source of everything. And there's no question, just like you said, Atman, when we're caught in depression, shame, anger, fear, you know, if we've been violated by another person, the world does not seem benevolent. It doesn't. And it's important to honor that, not say, oh, okay, it's a friendly world. What am I getting wrong here? You know, it's like, start where we are. And if in the moment that we're depressed or angry or hurting in some way, we meet that with presence, you know, with mindfulness, with kindness, that hand on the heart, it's okay, I'm here. What happens is we start opening up a quality of tenderness and awareness that's holding what's going on, and we have come back into sensing and glimpsing and feeling a bit of the gold, the goodness. It's like the ocean can hold the waves no matter how rough they are. I also want to say that we have a negativity bias that would turn us against sensing that benevolence habitually. In other words, we are programmed to scan for what's going wrong in ourselves and in each other, and it just keeps on reinforcing our worldview that it's a dangerous world, that you can't trust the world. You know, others are going to let us down. There's bad out there. And of course, the news doesn't help. So part of trusting the gold, and you know, there's that phrase, praise Allah, but tie your camel to the post. It's like trusting the gold, trusting goodness doesn't mean you think people aren't going to steal from you or hurt you. It just means that deep down under everything, there is love. So we rewire by accepting where there's cruelty and suffering in the world, and intentionally looking for the good. It's so important. It's so important to rewire that way, to on purpose see goodness in each other. So you and I look at each other and we'll pick up all sorts of stuff about our personalities, but can we be looking at each other and also seeing behind those eyes that there's a being here that wants to love and be loved, that there's a being here that wants for the well-being of others, that's creative. Can we see that? And can that be part of our practice too? So we don't just look for the personality stuff. And I think of it as a daily practice, just like the loving kindness practice. It's really a part of it that we start by seeing the goodness maybe in those that are easy, what we love about people, and wishing them well. There's also a daily gratitude practice that actually shifts depression. There's research on it. If you just each day in your own way practice remembering what you're grateful for. And I do it, sometimes I'll do it in retreats or workshops where I'll have people in pairs and they'll take turns asking each other, please tell me, what do you love? And it's very open-ended. But when you spend 5 minutes just talking about what you love, I love the feeling of being in the ocean and feeling the waves move me, I love my granddaughter. It's like your heart shifts because there's some sense that you've tapped into this basic beauty and goodness and mystery that's here. And here's an important piece, and this comes straight from neuroscience. This has everything to do with trusting the gold. We know that when bad things happen, they're very sticky. They go right into our unconscious mind, and they stay there, and they inform us. But when good things happen, let's say you have, 100 or 98 good experiences with a dog, but 2 when a dog scares you, 1 when a dog, goes after you. What are you going to remember? It's part of survival. We're going to remember the 1 or 2 bad experiences. So when the good stuff happens, when you get a glimpse of the gold, when there's, you're looking up at the sky and you see the first planets come out, because I've been seeing that in the night sky, or, when you see the gleam in a child's eye, you see a teen and you can see they're getting some confidence in themselves. Pause. 3 to 5 breaths and just take in the goodness, because that trains the brain to remember goodness. It actually makes the memory sticky. It goes into the implicit unconscious. Little brain science. And I'll just share one more way that it really helps me, and that is when I'm out walking, or just when I'm thinking about it, but often when I'm walking, I'll stop by a tree and I'll say, we are friends. I'll just say it, or whisper it mentally, and just sense the realness of relatedness when I actually am paying attention to another living form, or to a bird on a branch, or to a squirrel, or to the plants that are in my yard, or to our dog. She's not alive right now. I'd say, we're friends. And all of a sudden, the truth of that would spring out. Are other people I don't know, And when I start doing that, where everywhere I go, it's on some level, we are friends. Before going to the cash register at Safeway, I'll look at the person behind the cash register and say that. It changes everything. It's like when we feel a relatedness with everything, we can never feel alone. There's a fearlessness and a joy. I mean, there's amazing research now about, if you just greet strangers in a friendly way, it makes you happier. So I just kind of tossed out a whole lot of different ways that we can move through our day and actually cultivate this capacity to see goodness. And as we do, our trust gets deeper and deeper. It doesn't have us be Pollyanna-ish. We still not only register, but respond to the suffering. But there's a very deep, vast place of trust in the goodness that helps us hold it.
Definitely. I think that, you talking about that reminded me of, one of the reasons why me, my brother, and our other business partner actually started wanting to teach. When we graduated from college, we were trying to figure out like, what's the purpose of life? Why are we here? And it has to be more to life than just going to school, getting an education, getting married, getting a job, retiring, or having some kids, retiring and dying. It has to be more to life than that. And then, that's when we got back into, we dived deep into reading, and we were reading, philosophy, astronomy, creational theories, just a lot of different topics, trying to figure out like what the purpose of everything was. And, the only thing we could get out of it was like the answers within, but they would never let you know, like, how do you get within? And, around that time, our teachers started to, teach us, take a shallow dive into yoga and meditation and stuff like that. And we're like, yo, this is how you go inside. And, it was crazy because during that time, we dove deep into the practice. We moved back into our old neighborhood in West Baltimore, where like, a couple years ago was a Freddie Gray uprising. So it's a lot of, it was a lot of dilapidated houses, open air drug markets, gangs, just a lot that could really, stress and, cause someone to be like bitter in life living in that neighborhood. But, during that time we lived there and we were broke as hell. Just because, we started a business, but we weren't making any money off of it. And, our friends used to come visit us, and, they used to come into our neighborhood, and they have like these blue lights that have cameras connected to them, so they could kind of like watch what everyone is doing in our neighborhood. And, people used to get nervous when they used to see the blue lights, and, they knew they were in our neighborhood, that it was really hectic. And, our buddies would come over to our house and be like, yo, y'all live in one of the most violent neighborhoods. Y'all broke. Y'all have these blue lights blinking outside of your house all the time to make sure that y'all don't get, a good night's sleep. How the hell are you all still blissing out, and how are you all still happy? And then, we would be like, y'all have great jobs. Y'all are married. Y'all have live in great neighborhoods, and y'all are miserable, so it was really one of those things where like, well, we need to do something to teach people how to cultivate this love inside of them. And, it reminded me of what you were just talking about. And, it's really, once you can cultivate, love inside of yourself, you can actually, be love in other people's life and kind of awaken that. And I think that's one thing that we've seen in our nonprofit, in the work that we do, is that it's kind of like, we're really big into zombie movies. And, like we say, it's like love zombies. Like, you bite somebody and, you infect them with the love, and then somebody else bites somebody else. And that's one thing that we've seen in the work that we've done, is like, we have, we basically were the people to, be the love in our lives, and awaken that foundation of love, and then let it spill out. And, it spilled out into our community. And, it's a great way that we kind of saw love kind of emanate outways from our neighborhood, or from ourselves to our neighborhood, and now to all of our programs all across the nation. So love is very powerful. Just wanted to, add to what you said.
Love it. I love it. And I love the contagion feeling, because it is contagious. Like when you're lit up, the receptors in another person light up, and it just touches them. Their love wakes up. Very cool.
It does. It does. All right. So today's theme is around the journey. And I'm curious if you're willing to share, in this season of your life, what is something or a current practice you're called to focus on, and what's something you're actively letting go?
Like those questions. My more general meditation is kind of a non-practice, which is quieting the mind, not doing anything, letting life be just as it is, and resting, being the awareness that's here. And there's a current reflection that's kind of related to what I shared a little earlier that feels really alive to me, where as I move through the world, in some way there's this sense that whatever I'm encountering is sentient. It's life-loving life. And so let's say I'm walking outside, and this is a deepening of We Are Friends. I'll see a tree and I'll sense this is sentient in its own way. I'll see a dog or a bird or a plant or the geese on the river or a fish. This is all sentient. All of this life is sentient. This is all manifestations of awareness. It's life-loving life. And there's this sense of we're all the same. We're all expressions of awareness. We're loving expressions of awareness. And even though we're unique, we're indivisible. And it leaves me with a sense of wonder and reverence and unconditional love. So that's the active practice out in the world, which is just seeing the sentience of everything. And then what I'm actively letting go of, I think it's a life letting go, Atman, of judgment. And it could be, the real, external obvious ones or more subtle, but any version of superior, inferior. In any way, even slightly kind of having that lens out to, am I separating with judgment? Am I separating with judgment? That's like a really important inquiry. Realizing that in any moment of judging, it's a contraction, and there's more identification with the suffering, and there's more identification with the suffering of the coverings, really. And there's a forgetting of the gold. So I think that's the big one, is just constantly being sensitive to the appearances of judgment, and in the seeing of them, relaxing the grip, opening to something larger.
All right, thank you for that. Something really remarkable about your talks is how much humor and humility you bring. That's one thing about our teacher, me, my brother, and my other business partner teacher. He said if your class isn't laughing, then you're not being a good teacher. So you're definitely a great teacher. Just to let you know. You mentioned a time in your life when you would give yourself criticism after a talk and focus on what you could have done better. I see this so much in the kids I teach, as an education system can really focus on achievement, grades, and improvement. And this can come at a cost. Many of us have been taught that if we can keep looking for improvement, we can't grow. What might you say to someone who feels scared if they don't keep giving themselves criticism about growing? Like, what can they do?
Well, first I want to confirm what you're saying, because that's the fear. It's that, and I see it when I'll often do workshops and I'll ask people this question, like, what stops you from accepting yourself as you are, from really relaxing the negative self-judging? What stops you? And the fear is always, I'll never change. I'll get worse, I'll rape, I'll plunder, I'll, cause trouble. So there's this belief that the judge is essential for becoming the person they want to be. And first to say, it's great to seek to improve. I mean, it's healthy to be discerning about what needs attention. Okay, well, let's say in giving talks, better if I'm a little less wordy here, or if I get to the point there, if I speak slower and pause, something like that. But here's what doesn't serve, and that is fixating on what's wrong and putting ourselves down for it. And by that, I mean really getting negative towards ourselves. I should have known better. I should have done better, So the imperfect job becomes bad person, and then we're not at home in ourselves. And here's what science tells us, and I always find this interesting, is that when we're caught in harsh self-judgment, the learning centers in our brain are deactivated. Self-judgment deactivates the learning centers in our brain. We lose energy, our creativity falls. We actually lose full executive function. And we know that. The more uptight we get with ourselves, the more we're inclined towards mistakes. It just doesn't serve. So I often think of Carl Rogers, great American psychologist, who said, that it wasn't until he accepted himself as he was that he was free to change. In other words, acceptance, putting down that harshness, is the precondition to any meaningful change. It actually allows us to bring our potential forward. So when I'm working with people on this, we start identifying that fear belief that if I don't judge, I will never grow, I'll never change. We start identifying it. And often I talk about this wonderful phrase from Tibetan teacher Tsoknyi Rinpoche, which is, this is real but not true, meaning the belief is real, it's there, but it's not truth. And one of the greatest freedoms we can have is when we realize we don't have to believe our thoughts. We don't have to believe our thoughts. And so when people want to train themselves out of judging, a real key piece is when the judging comes up, just in some way say, I don't have to believe this, don't believe your thoughts, and don't believe your thoughts, and don't believe your thoughts. And instead of going down that track, just coming into the present moment in some way with kindness, just right here, and see what happens. And many people are scared, well, I'm still afraid if I stop, I won't change. And so what I often advise is to take the chance by doing an experiment. And 30 days is usually a good time for an experiment where you just say, the single thing I'm going to be most centering in my life right now is to wake up out of criticism. To not believe my thought, come back into presence, offer some kindness. And what I usually say is, if you do this for a month or so, if you start becoming a worse person, okay, drop it. But I've never seen that happen. Yeah.
All right. So one practice I learned from the Bhakti yoga tradition is a practice of seeing the light in someone else and recognizing that light is the same light that's inside of me. Our teacher kind of called it respect, like the word re-inspect, like re-again, spec to look at. Like, so it's like when you see somebody, you first see their physical makeup, but then if you look again, you see that light, which is the same as yours and the same as, everything that's, in existence. So I can respect our differences, but also sense the unity between us. At times, this has definitely been challenging when there's someone very angry with me or disrespecting someone I love. It's hard to do that. How can our practices help us bridge the divide, both in our personal life and collectively?
Thank you. Wonderful question. Well, like you, namaste, I see the divine in you. I love that. And in a way, it feels like the grounds of the path. Can we really see the truth? Can we see behind the mask of all the craziness, behind the coverings, can we see the gold? And just like you say, perfectly honestly, it's really hard when somebody's threatening to us or to someone who's dear. A helpful metaphor, this is from Roshi Joan Halifax, is that we're cultivating a strong back and a soft front. And this feels important because so many people have this idea that, well, no matter how somebody's acting, I should just open my heart with compassion. And it doesn't work that way. So a strong back means that we're protected, that there's a clarity, that we feel a sense of empowerment. If somebody's threatening us, first we take care. We set up the boundaries we need. And especially if someone's violated and traumatized us, it's not wise to try to see their goodness and forgive them too quickly, because we really need to establish that stability in ourselves first, that strong back. And collectively too, for a group that is being violated, take care. Do what's needed to protect, and make safe enough. Once we've done that, let's say somebody's angry at you, Atman, or is being threatening, and once you've done the basics of taking care, then you can sense the possible freedom that you can have in your own heart. And by way of example, because this was recent, I was working with a woman. She was divorcing. And during the relationship, she felt, threatened, and she felt kind of like he was emotionally abusive. So it was only after they separated and she had some boundaries, she had that feeling of the strong back, that she could begin to pay attention to him in a different way. And the way that happened was, first she did what I call the U-turn, where she came in and looked at her own heart. She was feeling angry, and she said, okay, what's under it? And she could feel the vulnerability that, if he acted that way, it meant he didn't care about me. I feel uncared for. And she could offer herself some compassion. And once she could offer herself compassion, she could then see him more clearly and start seeing his suffering, how he was feeling devalued in the relationship, how he felt hurt. We can't do that until we first have a strong back. We have to feel safe enough. But it's worth, once we do, cultivating the soft front. And the reason why is that, and I know you know this, it's suffering to stay in anger or hatred towards another person. It's suffering. I think of Brian Stevenson, who's one of my heroes, an African-American social justice activist and more. And he said, when people ask about, does somebody deserve compassion? He says, it's not about what they deserve. It's about what you want for your heart, a prison of hatred or the freedom of love. So we cultivate that soft front where we open our hearts to others when we can for our own freedom, and because it is contagious. And the pathway to the soft front, just say a little more about this because I feel like this is so important for our society, is we have to see how the other person is struggling. It's like Longfellow described a suffering that, he says there's a suffering that can disarm all hostility when you see it. And our society is so divided right now. Now I'm thinking of in the United States, the culture war is so profound. And often it's very strictly political. It can be red, blue, or whatever way we want to describe it. But we need ways to bridge the divide, to have that, open up that soft front. And I think of one story that most touched me in this, that feels like an important story. Van Jones, who's a commentator, social activist, he's kind of dedicated his life to bridging divides. And he organized a gathering in West Virginia. And what he did was he had people that were Black from South LA that were really fighting the heroin epidemic get together with people who were white from Appalachia who were fighting the opiate epidemic. And these were very different cultures coming together, these groups, okay? Very different. And initially there was a huge amount of tension and distrust. They had a week to talk to each other. They had a week to get to know each other. And at one point, they were sharing pictures of those dear ones that they had lost to the drug epidemics. And one man was showing a picture of his son, and he said, the last thing I said to him was, you got yourself into this. You get yourself out. And that was the last thing he said to his son. And you could see in this, and this is a documentary film, you could see others so touched. And I share this because everyone has a picture in their pocket. Everyone has some great loss. And if we could see the vulnerability of those that we call the enemy and really get the humanness, our hearts would open. We would find in ourselves this place of care, that soft front. And, if we're going to bridge the divides, we have to deepen our attention in this way. We have to get over just seeing the masks and the coverings and see the vulnerability and the basic goodness in anyone that we feel divided from. So a long response, but I feel like it's really central to really the well-being of our planet.
A wealth of knowledge in that response. Thank you for that. One of my favorite practices that you shared is rain. And this additional reflection of sitting in the space after the rain and investigating who we really are. To close our time together, I was hoping that you could guide us through that practice as a way of connecting to our true selves.
I'd be delighted to. Thank you for inviting me. And friends, for those of you who are listening, we'll call this a light rain because it won't be long. But you can give yourself to it by just in these moments finding a way to sit comfortably. And as you come into stillness, you might close your eyes or let your gaze be downcast. Let the attention go inward. Maybe take a few full breaths, long, deep breaths, making sure with the out-breath that there's a sense of letting go. Breathing in, filling the chest and the lungs. And as you breathe out, letting the shoulders soften, the hands soften. Breathing in, filling the chest and the lungs. And breathing out, letting go, letting go. So as the breath resumes in its natural rhythm, you can sense a presence that's right here. And you might scan your life and sense if there's any situation where you regularly get reactive, where you know you're living from the coverings, you're not living from the fullness of who you can be. Where either you turn on yourself or turn on somebody else. Your heart closes. So you might pick a situation like that. It could be a situation at home or at work. It could have something to do with a close relationship. It could have something to do with health. It could be addictive behavior. Some situation where you regularly kind of get hooked and you react in ways you wish you didn't. Where you get down on yourself, down on another person. Where you'd like more freedom. And when you think of a situation, actually bring it close in so you are having in your mind a particular place, the room you're in, or if you're outside where you are, and if somebody else is involved, the look on their face and the words they're speaking. And like a film, let it roll until you get to the frame where you get most reactive, where you get most upset, afraid, angry, whatever it is, and just pause the film there. And take a moment to notice what's the strongest thing you're feeling right now. Is it anger? Is it fear? Hurt? The R of rain, this is an acronym, RAIN, recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. The R of rain, recognize, means just to name the strongest emotions that are here. So you recognize by mentally whispering, maybe it's fear, you just say fear, or maybe it's anger, anger, or shame, shame. Just mentally whisper whatever you're noticing right now. That's the beginning of rain. Rain's a weave of mindfulness and compassion that you bring to whatever's here, and you're starting with R, recognize. The A of rain is allow, which means let it be here. You might think of the fear, or the hurt, or the anger as a wave, and it belongs, like all waves belong in the ocean. Just say, this belongs for right now. Let it be. Allowing. And then the I of rain is investigate, which means you deepen your attention with interest. Okay, what's this like? Investigating is primarily somatic in your body. And you might start by just asking yourself, when I'm feeling this way, what am I believing? Am I believing that another person wouldn't act this way if they cared about me? That I can't trust them? That I'm not lovable? That something's wrong with me? What am I believing? And deepen attention to feel where you feel the feelings in your body. Maybe the throat, the chest, the belly. And you might even, to increase the somatic experience, let your face take the expression of the feelings and your posture. Go ahead and experiment. So that you can go right to where you feel most vulnerable in your body and just breathe with it and feel it. Willing to feel what's here. This is part of investigating. You might ask the most vulnerable place in you, what do you need right now? How do you want me to be with you? And you might experiment by putting your hand on your heart, very light touch, taking a few breaths and calling in your most wise and compassionate heart. And just listen to what's needed. What does that vulnerable place need? Is it acceptance, love, compassion, company, understanding, forgiveness? From the wisest part in you, and you can contact this, you can call on this, from the most loving place in you. Offer what's needed, perhaps a message inwardly that comforts. You might say, I'm here and I'm not leaving. I'm sorry for this suffering. I love you. Trust your goodness. Or if there's fear, thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm okay right now. Just offer a message of love. And if it helps to offer it from a larger source, you might imagine someone that you trust or love sending the message through your hand into your heart. And let the touch be quite tender. And for these next few moments, this is all nurturing. For these next few moments, let the message and the love bathe you. And even if you've done this a lot of times, this time, see if you can really receive the love. Let it bathe and wash through all your cells and the spaces between your cells. Recognizing, allowing, investigating, nurturing. And now noticing the quality of presence that's emerged. Perhaps sensing that you're both the holder and the held. Holding the painful, vulnerable place, feeling held. Notice the quality of presence that's here. Notice if there's more spaciousness, more kindness, more openness, more awareness. And letting yourself rest in that. Letting yourself be that open space of tender awareness. And you might sense the shift from starting and being identified with fear or anger to this spacious, loving presence, which is the gold, which is more true than any story you could ever tell about yourself. Knowing that the more you trust in this, the more your heart will be free. Namaste.
Wow, thank you for that practice. Um, Thank you so much for sharing your immense wisdom today. It's been a real pleasure sitting with you. For everyone watching, to learn more about Tara's work and to get a copy of her latest book, Trusting the Gold, you can visit tarabrach.com. Thank you all for making time to hang out with us, and have a great day.